And the Word of Faith movement is led by people such as Benny Hinn. What has happened is that the United States of America has created this false theology and has now exported it to the rest of the world, to the point that now the face of Christianity in most of the world today is Word of Faith.
The idea, simply put, is that if you love Jesus, if you're a follower of Christ, you can generally expect health, wealth, and happiness.
The prosperity gospel appeals to two of the most basic and universal of all human desires: to be wealthy and never to be sick.
Nobody wants to die, nobody wants to be sick, and nobody wants to be poor.
All the things that Jesus says we have to be willing to set aside to follow Him. They take all of those things and they make that the attraction of the gospel.
I don't know what you feel about the prosperity gospel, the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel, but I'll tell you what I feel about it: hatred. They'll say, Jesus give you that? Yeah, well, I'll take Jesus. That's idolatry. That's not the gospel.
The Jesus who's gonna help me pay my taxes at the end of the year, the Jesus who's gonna correct my wife's genetic disorder, I'll take that Jesus. That Jesus sounds great. But what that is idolatry. It's an elevation of the gift above the giver.
The prosperity gospel is exactly like marrying someone for their money.
Are you coming to God for God, or are you coming to God so that you can ultimately get what your heart's truly after, and that's something else?
The Bible is not against wealth. It's not against happiness. It's really, how do we view those things?
It is true that God does want us to be happy, but that happiness is not the way that 21st century American culture would define happiness.
If you're talking to someone who's already achieved success, they've had the cars, the beautiful wife, the children, and they have everything that the world says you should have to be happy, and yet there's something missing.
I was very successful in the business world. I began as a rocket scientist down in Cape Kennedy, Florida. Later on, I was recruited to a computer firm in Dallas. Everything I touched turned to gold.
Everything that I had desired and that I acquired, it had an ending to it. Even when I bought my first real expensive sports car, it wore off. I was thinking of the next car.
And really, there was an emptiness inside of me in spite of everything that I had accumulated.
And so when I met Jesus Christ, I found something that wouldn't end.
The ultimate gift of the gospel is not all of these other things. It's God Himself. God is both the giver and the gift.
And I think this is what happens in our pulpits Sunday after Sunday. Christ is hidden from the American gospel, and essentially I think that is the problem. Because the gospel's not a plan, it's a person.
The call of the gospel is a call to follow Christ. And Christ made that call. He said, "Follow me." Paul makes the call in the same way, saying, we preach Christ and Him crucified. The center of the message of both Jesus and Paul was Christ Himself, Christ, His work, and the response that says, I will submit, I will follow after Christ.